we're looking at, like I say, 7.5% or so, but then I think falling away fairly rapidly over 2023 and 2024 because that whole wage price dynamic is completely different from what it was in the 1970s or 80s. Well, hi again, everybody. At the moment, New Zealand's inflation rate, or the change in the average cost of living over the past year, has been 5.9%, and fairly soon we may get that above 7.5%, maybe even 8% with the increases we're seeing in food prices around the world, and obviously energy prices in particular. Maybe not so much gas of relevance here in New Zealand, but definitely overseas for heating purposes. It's hitting into their budgets. This is a global thing, and of course we're seeing the government now starting to come up with a few ideas on maybe how to help a few families. Well, I sort of saw part of this scenario coming earlier this year, and I did a survey of my 25,000 subscribers and asked people to give their ideas on what young people these days could do with a mortgage, without a mortgage, whatever, if they're looking to make some sort of savings based on their memories maybe of when inflation was high. For instance, between 1970 and 1987 in New Zealand, the average rate of of inflation overall in New Zealand was almost 13% a year. Consumer prices were doubling every 6 years. We're looking at, like I say, 7.5% or so, but then I think falling away fairly rapidly over 2023 and 2024 because that whole wage price dynamic is completely different from what it was in the 1970s or 80s. But in the survey, the results I sent out back in January, and I also sent them out again over the weekend. Now it's right at the front of people's minds. You can access these just going to the middle page of my website, tonyalexander.nz, and the top suggestions that people were making there, including things like cut back on your eating out, drinking outside of the home, buying your lunch at work, for instance. These are not the sort of things that people in the hospitality sector want to hear, but basically for many people, it's an easy way to save somewhere between $2,000, $5,000, $7,000 a year when you add up how much you are spending per day, per week, per year on coffee, for instance, your cappuccinos or your lattes. Basically delaying some of your spending. So you might have been looking at replacing the couch or even the car in the near future. Well, usually when people are facing pressed times, higher interest rate payments to make, etc., they look to delay some of their spending into the future. And unfortunately for some people, that might mean not going for that overseas holiday in the coming 1 to 2 years, as people have been wanting to do, obviously, for the past 2 years, simply in order to make sure that the budget is still going to leave some spare space there in case some health issues come along, things to do with the kids' education, emergency expenses, those sort of things. A few other ideas to come through: buying in bulk of your goods there. Some people suggested going vegetarian. Obviously, looking at all of your subscriptions, the stuff you've signed up for, and each month, kabang, you're paying there for your TV services, etc. Have a rigorous look at what you've signed up to there, but also have a look at how you can earn some extra income. And this is where things are quite different from previous periods of high inflation in New Zealand, in that back in those earlier times, we tended to have high unemployment. This time around, somebody wants you to do some work for them, so you can fairly easily pick up some extra hours, maybe a part-time job. We've also, remember, got a shortage of rental accommodation around the country, so plenty of opportunities to take in a boarder, to take in a flatmate, and these days Trade Me exists. Again, we didn't have that back in the 70s and in the first half of the 1980s. You can more easily sell off some of your unwanted goods and maybe make some extra money that way. So these are the things people need to look at doing, not just to handle the high cost of living overall, but of course the interest rates going up and still going to go higher. As I said last week, I still don't think they're going to go to really high levels because the increase in oil prices in particular acts as a tax on our economy. It's already slowing things down quite a bit, which is what the Reserve Bank, frankly, is after. All the best out there.